everybody, it's Stewart A. Swerdlow for Expansions.com, and this is the very last week of February 2012, and I have some things to show you today. First thing, people have been writing into me about this mysterious quake that occurred somewhere between North Carolina and Florida. And you may have seen videos on the internet that have talked about it, and that the USGS has actually removed it from its information and does not even recognize that something happened, even though machines and seismographs indicate that there was some kind of significant event that was felt even as far west as Iowa. And according to the analyses of these reports, the deepest or the center of the quake was felt somewhere around South Carolina, which can make a lot of sense because that is where there's a huge fault line in the Charleston area. Actually, it starts in the eastern part of North Carolina and goes down through the eastern coast of South Carolina and into the eastern coast of Georgia. And back in 1886, there was a huge quake in the Charleston area that was felt as far north as New York and as far south as Miami and as far west as St. Louis. And so it is known to occur in this region. However, if there were or had been a quake of that magnitude, there would have been significant damage. So it's an odd thing that happened, that there would be an event that was registered over such a large area, yet no damage reported and not many people saying that they even felt anything. So what I have to look at from that is that perhaps some kind of electromagnetic energy or pulse or something artificial was emanating from this area here that gave off maybe sound waves, electronic waves that registered on the seismic equipment, but did not actually cause the Earth to physically move. So that is something that probably will be further investigated at some point. But this has been known to happen here before. In fact, this whole area, actually from Virginia southward and even up to New Jersey, back in the 1970s and 80s, they reported what was considered to be airquakes, meaning something created a boom in the sky that actually shook the ground, but the center of that shaking was actually in the sky, not the ground. And they call them airquakes, and maybe not too many of you recall that from the 1970s or 80s, but it happened a lot back then, especially during the summertime, and it is believed now it was being caused by test aircraft out in the Atlantic Ocean that reverberated onto the ground. Other things that have happened as far as seismic activity is a quake in an area that has not been seen before. In the northern part of the Texas Panhandle here, we're not far from the Oklahoma state line, there was a minor to moderate quake there a couple of days ago. And most of the quakes in Oklahoma and Texas are occurring in this region, and yet we have one here in this area. So that might be part of that ancient Creton, a fault line maybe that goes off from there that's been moving as well. Also in the United States, here in northeastern Ohio, just a day or so ago, there was a shooting at a high school by a boy who claimed he was bullied by the people he attacked. So far there are 2 known dead. There are others in the hospital right now. I'm not sure about what their status is. Nobody apparently knows how he got the weapons. His parents don't know why he did it, but he told the police that he did it because he was being bullied. And that is the key trigger word of the last couple of years, bullying in school. And basically we have seen the targets of the bullying commit suicide. Now we see the reverse, where the targets are actually fighting out against those who bullied them and now killing them, if that story is true. And we may not know that for a while, if at all. So does this mean now that there's a trigger for those who are being bullied to fight back and attack their attackers? That's interesting if that were to occur. It's kind of a reverse programming going on. So we need to keep an eye on that and see what happens. So I would like to now go to the international part of my report to you. And there's a couple of things going on. Someone doesn't like the Costa cruise line. Because we know what happened here off the coast of Italy when the Costa Concordia was sunk in January. Now its sister ship, the Costa Allegra, caught fire and is drifting off the coast of the Seychelles after leaving Madagascar. And of course, at this moment, there is a French cargo ship that is tugging it or pulling it towards the Seychelles so that they can offload the passengers. But the Costa Allegra is the sister ship of the Costa Concordia. So it's apparent, you know, I reported a couple of weeks ago about all the problems with Qantas Airlines and how someone in Singapore keeps sabotaging Qantas Airlines. Now we have the Costa Concordia in different parts of the world, or Costa Allegra now, being sabotaged. And that company is owned by Carnival. And we find also this week in Mexico that 22 Carnival cruise line passengers were robbed at gunpoint during the shore excursion. So something's going on out there to make people not want to go on the high seas. And that's very interesting. Maybe something's going on in the oceans and they don't want people to go out on there to see what the heck's going on. So we need to keep an eye on that. We also need to keep an eye on the volcanoes in Costa Rica. There is a volcano there which is now going into high level alert because of an imminent eruption that could be very significant. And one interesting story that I want to talk to you about, and that's been popping up lately, and I've talked about it on my website, and we've talked about it in my True World History segments, and that is that in the southern, or I should say both southern and northern parts of Japan, there are shrines to Emmanuel or Jesus. And people think, what is that about? How do we get Jesus in Japan when it was all the way over here? Well, you know that I've talked about how there was really no crucifixion as it reports in the Bible, but actually a staged event, and that the Christ figure with his oldest son and his entourage crossed Asia and wound up in Srinagar in the Kashmir, which is now disputed between India and Pakistan. And I also told you that the grandson of Emmanuel left Srinagar with an entourage and went across Asia, and according to the Japanese, actually went across Siberia into Alaska and then came back down by ship to northern Japan. And that's why we have very similar description of Japanese culture and Hebrew culture. And in fact, I just saw a video, and I posted it on my website, where rabbis from Israel arrived in Japan to genetically prove that the Japanese were part of the lost tribes of Israel. And they've also proven that there were other people in the world who were the lost tribes of Israel. In fact, I may have mentioned in my True World History that at one time in southern China, there were as many as 50 million Jews that were living there, who have since been assimilated in the communist regime since the late 1940s. And when I was in the Negev desert of Israel back in the 1970s, I was in the Negev desert hut of David Ben-Gurion, one of the founders of the Israeli nation, and on his desk was a book called Chinese Jews. And in that book it described the millions and millions, tens of millions of Jews in China. And isn't it interesting that many of the German Jews in World War II who escaped Nazi Germany went to Shanghai, where they still exist, and there's a large Jewish community in Shanghai, China. So there is a very strong connection between the Chinese and the Japanese and the Israelis. And the other interesting thing is someone actually did an analysis of the Japanese lettering or characters, which looks very similar to ancient Hebrew letters. And even there's a Japanese festival that is performed every year that also describes how the Japanese culture was created. And on their floats, they have symbols of the Middle East and bearded Middle Eastern looking men on their floats. Why is that part of Japanese culture? You have to wonder about that, and that's been going on for centuries and centuries. So, more information that we will be looking for, the connection between Japan and Israel, and maybe that explains why after the Japanese earthquake 1 year ago, the Israelis were the first ones to go to Japan to help rebuild that country and to rescue the people in that area. So I invite you every week to look at our webinars. Sign up. We have them Mondays and Wednesday evening, 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. Eastern Time. Go to expansions.com for details. We hope to also see you at our April conference at the end of April this year, 2012, here in St. Joseph, Michigan. So until next time, this is Stewart A. Swerdlow for expansions.com.